sector. So today we have our guest speaker, who we shall be introducing very shortly. But before we do, allow me to invite our chair, Catherine, to give a few opening remarks, and then we can get on with the program. Karibu, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Rose. I hope you can hear me. My internet is really terrible, so I cannot even put on my camera. Let me just quickly welcome everybody to this session and thank our guest speaker, Lynn. It's such a pleasure always to have you with us. Thank you so much for agreeing to mentor us. You have walked that journey in public service, and we look forward to learning from you. Rose and team, thank you so much for putting this together. And I am looking forward to a very interesting evening. Asante sana, Lynn, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Our members, please take advantage of these opportunities to learn from our guests who have gone before us and our guests who are very knowledgeable in the particular areas. We are hoping that we shall use this program to increase the number of women within the public sector, public service, because that is the only way we can start to influence policy, particularly around public service. Thank you so much, Rose, and back to you.
Thank you, Catherine. We apologize that your network isn't great, but I think we've had your opening remarks and asante sana. So allow me to give just a quick overview around what this program is all about. We've had a chance to go through several mentorship programs. So we'll be speaking to this particular one and what it means for you for the next 6 months. So Kantai, if you could please share that. Now, as I was reading the World Bank statistics, there were a couple of facts that came out. And one of the aspects was that in most countries, the share of women working in public sector is much higher than the share of women working in the formal sector. And the gender pay gap is almost 10% points lower in the public sector than in the private sector. So if we have more women working in public sector, why then is it a challenge for us to rise to the top and take on some of these leadership positions at board level? And so as Women on Boards, we came together and discussed this, and we said, it would be interesting to have a program where we can get women and men who are serving in the public sector or have served to be able to share their insights around how, one, those who are in private sector can transition, but also once you do get there, what are some of these nuances that then you must be able to wade through? So the Women on Boards Public Sector Mentoring Program is a 6 months program where we will be engaging with senior members who've worked in boards in the public sector to be able to share their insights and mentor us through this journey. So we kick off today. Hopefully we should be able to complete this program by December. And today is really just an introductory session for us to get to know each other, but also listen to our guest speaker around how she was able to transition from private sector to public and leading in a very interesting space where it's largely male dominated. That is the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Enter. So some of the objectives, and I won't read all of them because this document was shared with you, is really to provide a space for us as Women on Boards members to learn from those who serve within the public sector. When we do have, the physical sessions, there will be, networking opportunities for us to get to know each other and share, some of what we have learned. Get better oriented to public service boards, because, we have some differences around that. Gain capacity to translate, values and strategies into productive action items, build social capital, especially within the public board structure, and also get assistance with ideas and honest feedback for us in Women on Board so that then we can continue to improve the program. So the program will have, virtual sessions. Hopefully we can be able to have physical sessions as well. We'll have some case studies that we'll be able to discuss in between the various mentorship sessions. So it's going to be an exciting program, and we do urge that you stay with us for the next 6 months. So what does that journey look like? Kantai, the next slide, please. So we kick off today with a 2-hour session where we will be able to engage with our guest speaker. And then thereafter, we will have 5 different monthly mentoring sessions. To put off, please put your mic on mute. Thank you. So we'll have 5 other different sessions. Every single month, we'll have a different speaker coming to speak with us. We're also looking to get, a space where we can have panel discussions with several speakers. And then at the end, in December, we'll have a reflection and a conclusion, and hopefully a graduation as well. So an exciting 6 months, and we do look forward to having you on board. So at this juncture, allow me to invite our guest speaker. She is somebody who's well known to us, has been a great supporter of women in leadership. And so today we are privileged to have none other than Mrs. Lynn Mengich, who is the chairperson of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. She is a leader and HR professional with over 25 years cross-industry experience, holding top-level positions in a wide range of publicly traded and private organizations. She has a wealth of experience in leadership and human resource management, having worked in senior HR roles as CEO and consultant for Nuevo Consulting, HR Director for Barclays Bank Kenya, HR Director, Kenya Commercial Bank, Talent Manager, Shell Oil Products Africa, Change Manager at Shell Oil Products Africa, HR Director at SmithKline Beecher West Africa, and she previously served as a board member at Jamii Bora Bank, Sovereign Group, and NSSF. So quite a rich CV, having started with the private sector, now in public sector. A majority of her clients, I imagine, are, male-dominated space. So it'll be interesting, Lynn, to hear a little bit about what that journey has been like, the good, the bad, the challenges, the opportunities, and perhaps challenges to be able to take on those roles. So karibu sana, Lynn, the platform is yours.
Thank you, Ross, for that quick introduction. So ladies, I'm excited to be here today, especially that it is the first forum for the group that is here today. I must say from the onset that indeed this mentoring program is very, very effective. I know previously it's more been in the private sector. So I'm glad, Rose and Catherine, and I really want to thank you that you have thought of including the public sector in this program. So ladies, let me just walk you through my journey, but I'll be more interested in taking questions from yourselves because I don't know what you want to hear, but I will open it up by just taking you through my journey, and hopefully from there we can have an interactive session when you can ask as many questions as you can. So Ross has introduced me, and therefore I don't want to go back to my career. You have heard I've held both board positions as a board member and now as chair of SRC, and previously more in the HR space. So today is just to speak through how I transitioned to the public sector. But in doing that, I'm also hoping to just touch a little bit on what it really takes then to be in the public sector board. What are the things that you need to be ready so that you prepare yourselves beforehand? And indeed, as you go through this journey, one of the things is clearly that for any board membership, make sure you are ready. You have to have gone through a process that prepares you and you're ready for that assignment. So indeed, these 6 months, ladies, will be an opportunity for each one of you to prepare yourself to be ready for a board appointment, which does not have to be in the public sector. When Rose mentioned to me about this mentoring program, I did point out to her that I am sure in the private sector, there are many boards that would love to have someone from the public sector to bring the public sector experience to their boards. So as you begin this journey, this is really not about preparing yourself to be in the board in the public sector, but just, it can be private sector, it can be public sector. So have that in mind that actually the space is open. There are many more organizations today who are looking for women in boards, to be in boards, and especially private sector. They take it very seriously and they're looking for women a lot of the time. So, and of course, there are reasons why that is the case. And it's because organizations have realized that women bring certain things that are unique to boards. And in bringing that to a board, the board performs better. So just that realization alone has enabled many organizations to deliberately go out there to look for women and place them in boards. So with that just quick overview, let me talk through my journey of how I transitioned. So I may not have interacted with most of the people in the public sector, but I know, at the senior levels, I have interacted quite a lot. So I joined the public sector in 2018, in September 2018. So when you then transition from private sector to public sector, what does it take? So if I just look at what is really required when you go to a board, in the positions that most of you are holding today, there will be broadly three broad categories of competencies that are required of you today. There will be the technical competencies that is required in your area of specialty. And then as you move up, there will be leadership skills that become more and more critical as you begin leading teams, managing different types of resources, whether financial or other resources. There is quite a lot of leadership competencies there. Then there is another type of competencies which are mainly around behavioral competencies. And all these three are very important in our different roles. So we all begin with becoming experts in our technical space. And therefore the question is that relevant even as you move to a board? And is it different in the public sector and private sector? So if I begin with that technical expertise or technical skills that we all have, that skill, when you move to a board, it is still important. I know there is a lot of discussion normally of, if I'm a leader, do I need to be a technical expert? And the answer is not necessarily. But when you get to a board, there is always a desire to have a mix of skills in a board. So boards will look for a mix, someone with finance, with HR, and all the other skills. So indeed, even that technical expertise becomes a skill that board look for. Not for you to be in the board to be a technical expert, to bring perspective from that profession where you come from. So it's still very relevant that as you prepare yourself to go to be in a board, you still must have a specialty that you're bringing in. And therefore, boards will look for a mix. Not everybody will have the same skill set. So how then did I transition from that perspective from private to public? You will find that the technical skill is easily transferable. It is easily transferable. There may be some differences here and there, but overall, not much difference. One will easily transfer that skill from one organization to the other. You will easily transfer it from private sector to public sector, and you can still transfer that skill and apply it effectively. And even at the board level, you will still be able to transfer that technical skill to whichever board that you're appointed to, because you're not a technical expert. So it's easily transferable either way, public to private, from where you sit today to a board. But the message there is you must be someone who is known for some expertise in something. And that expertise in whatever area you are in is something that boards would look for, and it's easily transferable. Now, let me talk about the leadership. Now, when it comes to the leadership, again, most of you I know are senior, you're senior leaders in your own right, and you will have transitioned through the different leadership ladders in your organization. You will be familiar, of course, with the ladders that you've gone through, from being a team leader to managing managers to being a strategic leader. So as you then progress higher, the skill that becomes more and more relevant is the strategic leadership. But by all means, that does not exclude the leadership before the strategic leadership. It assumes you're building on the base and you're a strategic leader. So at that level of strategic leadership, again, the competencies between private and public sector are not different, except the way you apply those skills become a little bit different. And I will just use a few examples just to demonstrate what I mean by they may be a bit different. Let's take, for example, one of the competencies that become really critical in the public sector is one of networking and one of stakeholder management. So when you're in the private sector and you talk about stakeholder management as a leadership skill, which is very important, your stakeholders are different than the stakeholders you'll find in the public sector. And you'll also find that in the public sector, because you're likely to be operating in a space that is more homogeneous, it is more homogeneous. Because if you are working for example, in my case, if I'm working for Barclays, for example, then most of my stakeholders are likely to be within the banking sector. So you are dealing with people who relatively, you have a lot in common. You're both in the financial sector, and therefore your stakeholder management comes from a level of some shared interest and understanding of each other relatively easy because you're operating in the same space. Now, when you move to public sector, you're then dealing with a relatively diverse stakeholder group, very diverse. If I use my role, for example, you will have the county governments, right? That is a totally diverse group of stakeholders. And within the county governments, you will have the legislative arm of government, the executive arm of government, and they have unique needs and their perspectives are different. Then you're then dealing with the national government, you're then dealing with the executive, you're dealing with the judiciary, and that becomes, and the legislature as well. So those three distinct arms of government, they are different stakeholders with totally different interests, and they have different perspectives on a number of things. So when you get to public sector, therefore, one of the things that for me has, is key, and I look at it as something that one has to quickly get to build the skill is the stakeholder management, because of just their sheer diversity and their different interests. Now, is that different for you ladies today, even as you hear my story? Would it be different if you moved to yourselves to another public sector or private sector board? The answer is no, because you will still have to start learning that skill of how you manage very different stakeholders, remembering that each stakeholder has their own interests. And because you're all in the public sector, you will be very familiar that the fact that many people talk about what are the interests of the other party. And therefore, it is a slightly different space when you move to public sector. Stakeholder management become very, very key. And of course, that stakeholder management does not stop at internal stakeholders. There is a lot of external, and I deal a lot with the external stakeholders as well, external to the organization and external to the public service. You will deal a lot with the media on an everyday basis. You deal with other public that are interested in whatever it is that you're doing. So that's a critical skill that I must say one has to start quickly. You must still have that skill, and I had it. I've been managing stakeholders, but you come to a slightly different space that requires you to quickly learn how to apply that skill differently. So that's one of the key skills that I would say, I quickly had to see how to manage in this environment, which is slightly different than the public sector. Now, other competencies that are in leadership, they are very critical in boards, and they are easily transferable from public to private sector, which all of us in this forum today will quickly have to start learning is when you move to board level, then there are certain leadership competencies and values that you must demonstrate. One of them for me in my space is one of courage to do things that is right. What is right? You must have the courage to do what is right. And it becomes more critical, in fact, in the public sector than even in the private sector. So for me, that is one of the transitions that I had to quickly look at. This is my space. This is what is expected. There are so many stakeholders, different interests, but you must have the courage to stand by what is right. And to me, that is one of the skills that we all must learn, especially once you transition to the board, right? You have the courage to stand by what is right, because there will be times that there are discussions and people may have taken different views, people may have different interests, and there are many pressures from many quarters to do certain things in a certain way. So just having the courage to stand and say, this is the right thing, I will stand by the right thing. You be ready to face whatever comes across your way because of standing for the right thing. So that's another thing that I must say, moving to the public sector for me, and specifically in this role, is one that was a transition that I had to make and have to really consistently have the courage to do the right thing, and to quickly make the decisions that you need to make. Now, that, of course, is not different from private to public sector. It's relatively the same. Now, some of the areas that is then very critical for anybody in boards, whether public, private sector, which for me were easily transferable and would still be very relevant for you ladies as you prepare to move to board leadership, is when you are in a board, one of the things is, what is it that you're bringing? What do you bring to that board? What is the impact that you will make in that board? And it's very important, ladies, even where you are today, is what can people remember you for? Or what can people say, this is what we know you stand for, or this is what you have done? What is the impact? So that trail that everybody knows, so and so, they're good at this, so and so, these are the things they have done, they have made an impact. And therefore, when you transition even to the board, for one, that is what people will look for to appoint you to a board. But when you get to the board, you must constantly remember that you are there because you must make an impact in that board. And you know, and I've attended many boards, not necessarily even the ones that we mentioned today, but sometimes you'll find board members who are not really putting their best. They're not making the decisions they need to, they're not making the impact. Because at board level, more than any other level in leadership, you must be in a position to take the right decisions and be able to be counted and be able to really discharge the mandate that is required of that institution. It ceases to be my interest. It ceases to be being friendly to everyone around you, but it becomes more of, I am now a board member, and therefore I must be able to, first and foremost, whatever I do is the interest of the organization. It has to be in the interest of organization. And when you're in the public service, it has to be in the interest of the citizens. And quite often in the public service, we may do things that is for our interest or they are convenient for us to do. But the center of what we do in the public service is about service to the citizens. And hence bringing the centrality of the citizens in our service and how we discharge our different mandates becomes a very key skill that each one of us must then bring on board when you move to a level of a board, even in our current positions. So again, that's a leadership skill that is about the ability to put the customer at the center of what you are doing. And ask yourself, who is that customer? Who am I serving? In the public sector, it is the citizens. So can I put that in the center of what I'm doing so that my work is centered around delivering the mission and the vision of the organization that I am working for, or for the board that I am appointed to. So ladies, that's as I talk about the vision and the mission, is the other very key focus at senior leadership level. It's about you know, is the vision and the mission of that organization something you identify with? Can you actually say, I am in this board position because I identify with the vision and mission of the organization? And therefore, for me, transitioning from private to public is one of the things that I must say it is similar. There's not much difference about that transition. And even for you, as you transition from where you are to a board, that centrality of the mission and vision of the organization becomes critical. The board becomes the vision carrier. You are the carrier of the mission and the vision of the organization. And the opposite of that, so that I demonstrate what I mean, is where one is at a board for their own interest, right? And therefore, when it comes time for making decisions, because that's what a board does every day, you have to make decisions every day. Are those decisions centered around the mission and the vision of the organization? And is your own vision and mission aligned to that of the organization? Because if you miss the alignment, it will become very difficult for you to be effective at whatever level. Once you get to senior leadership, you get to board level, that alignment is critical. Hence, you know, for me, don't take a board position because it's a board position. You must ask yourself a question around, is the vision and mission of that organization aligned to mine? Or can I align myself to their mission and vision? And if you can't, you will struggle in making the right decisions, which is what a board member is required to do. Now, let me talk, and I did say there are three areas I will talk about: the technical, which I've discussed, the leadership, I've mentioned a few of them, and you know, I'm not going to try and go through all the leadership competencies that is required at leadership and a board level. But I want to talk about the behavioral, because behavioral is very, very important. And behavioral is something that is about the person. It is what people see every day, what you demonstrate every single day in your role. And sometimes it is said that women have certain characteristics that is unique to women, and some characteristics are unique to men, and that the way we play in this becomes very important. So as you transition from one level of leadership to the other, or transition from senior leadership to the boards, the behavioral values becomes so critical. And hence, you know, one then has to think about, what is my value system, right? What are my values? And what are the values of the organization that I'm going to work for? And am I ready to stand by the values that is required, or the values that you hold yourself, right? And I want to talk about a few that are very important in the public service. Integrity is one, right? And we all know, we all talk about, you know, public service, integrity is key, and we all say, yes, we are all people of integrity. And it's a requirement in the Constitution that we must be people of integrity. So when we then say integrity is important, and of course it's important both in the public and private sector, and for me that transition was not difficult. The only thing is, as you move to public sector, then that value is tested, right? And that value is actually tested, and you will know whether that individual is a person of integrity or not. And sometimes people say integrity is tested when there is an opportunity. Public sector brings a lot of opportunities for people to be tested on their integrity. And that is when you know what that person stands for. And in my journey, because part of this was about sharing my own journey, I have been in a board, not my current position, but I've been a board where I actually resigned after 6 months. And I said, you know what? I think I'm better off not being in this organization, because the things that, you know, you're being pressurized to sort of sign off and say, this is it, are just not right. And I said, well, I think I'm better off resigning than do something that I don't really believe in. So in the private sector, there are less conflict around integrity. In the public sector, they become more and more apparent. And I must say, statistics show that women are more likely to stand up and be counted when it comes to values such as integrity, accountability, responsibility. Are we accountable? Can I be held accountable? Do I hold myself accountable? And do I hold others accountable? And that accountability in the public service demonstrates itself in many ways, but one of the ones that stands out is our accountability on public finances, for example, or any other assets in the public service. So that becomes an area of our behavior and our value system that then will either break the individual or help them to grow and become, in a board setup, a person that they can be trusted, they can be held into account, and they hold themselves into account, and they can stand up again to do the right thing, right? So for me, ladies, that's one area that, as we all aspire to become board members, and as we prepare in this journey, one must really think about the values. One must think about, what do I want to achieve? Am I ready to stand up to be counted? Am I ready to be held accountable in whatever I do? And if the answer is yes, then you are ready for board membership. If one is not very sure, then the best is don't try that journey, because in a board you will be tested around those areas of accountability, of integrity, and it becomes something that you must think about each and every day. Now, the other area I would like to talk through, and I'm looking at the time, the other quick area I would like to talk through before we get into the Q&A is this area about women, gender. Now, I'm talking about women in leadership, and whether indeed there are certain things that are unique about our gender that will either facilitate us to be in board leadership, or they become a hindrance. They can either become an enabler, or there are things that may hinder women from becoming board members or taking up senior leadership positions. And I want to just go to, Rose earlier mentioned, and actually, Rose, you raised more of a question, that statistics show there are more women in the public service than in the private sector. However, there are fewer women in senior leadership, or it was more specific to board. But I know it's actually not just board, because even our own statistics, ladies, in the public service, there are fewer women in senior leadership. But if you were to take statistics at the lower level, we probably would be okay. So the question then is, what is it that is making women not progress to senior leadership or to boards as faster as men? Is there something that we can learn from each other on what is it that women must think through as as you prepare yourselves to move to board level? So, and I just say, using my own example, is how has my journey been to be able to make to move to that level. So the first thing I want to say, ladies, and of course there are many reasons, and I'll only just touch what is just a few of them, but you will go through the 6 months and I'm sure you'll explore some of these things. The first thing, which a lot of the time stops women progressing, is ourselves. We are the ones who will set limitations. We set the ceiling for ourselves, and then we say there is a ceiling, but actually you are the one who set that ceiling. Yes, I accept there will be challenges, and I do not underestimate challenges in the workplace. But the first thing is ourselves. Do we feel that there is a ceiling? Because if you put that ceiling in your mind, in your mindset, it will restrict how many, what level of progress you wish to make going forward. And some of these limitations, as well as saying, these are limitations we put on ourselves. And I know there are those that are put on us by the environment and the people we work with. But for me, the first one is personal limitations. If you can get out of that one, then you will have made the first step towards getting into board membership. And that limitation sometimes is around, listening to all the things people say, where women can't do this, because of that, because of that. And there are many things people will say, women can't, but that is not true. So as an individual, you must begin by saying, you know what, all those things people say women can't do, I can do, right? All those ceilings people say exist, I shall break that ceiling. So your own mindset must be right and be ready to break whatever barriers that we may put on ourselves before we talk about barriers that others may impose on ourselves, right? So for me, then, therefore, as you begin your mentoring journey, one of the things that you need to ask yourself is, are there limitations that sometimes I may put on myself? Things people say, it's difficult for women to okay. So ladies, it's about us ourselves that we need to think around that, is what are the things that I am putting limitations on myself. But the second part of what are the limitations that are around me that are either brought about by your organization or the people you work around with, and be able to identify those limitations, those barriers, and think through how to work through those challenges, because they will be there. But it doesn't mean that they should restrict us as women from progressing to the next level, because we should be able to progress by addressing those limitations, those barriers that are around us. So that's the other part, ladies, as you begin this journey. It's about myself and my limitations. Am I putting them on myself? Are there those that are placed on me in my environment that I can be able to work through it with the help of others to remove those limitations? So if you allow me, Rose, I will stop there so that we can have more time for just Q&A.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Certainly interesting insights, especially around the personal limitation. It's something that we haven't really talked about quite a bit, even within our mentorship session. So we do have a few questions before we break into the virtual rooms. The first question is from Elizabeth Derito. She says, regarding courage to what is right, how have you struck a balance between the different interests and possible negative consequences? Have you ever faced any retaliation? And the second one is from Carol. She says that she's noticed that most new board members are successful entrepreneurs, have run their business. Is this the norm as opposed to those who have been employed? So difference between those in employment. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the third one is from Carol, who says most organizations have written values and culture, and that's different from what actually happens on the ground. Mm-hmm. So how do you succeed in holding on to what is right without paying the ultimate price of losing your job? So the issue around fear as well, in terms of doing what is right. So yes, so please go on with those three, and then we can break into our rooms.
Okay, thank you. So the first one is about doing the right thing and whether there are consequences and how do you go about those consequences. For me, the first thing is, and now I want to use an example. We had a training recently from Strathmore Business School, and one of the speakers, who is a board member, and I think it's someone you will probably meet during your 6 months, he tell us something that was interesting around that. And he said, you know, even organizations such as the mafia have a code, they have a code of conduct. And he said one thing is, within that mafia group, their code of conduct code like this: if you do something I don't like, I will not touch your children, I'll not touch your wife, I'll only come for you. He said in the public sector, now whether it's true or not, but you know, I kind of identified with this. In the public sector, it's a slightly different code. If you do something that I don't like, and it is likely to impact what I do, I will not harm you physically. It's very unlikely. But I may tarnish your name one way or the other. That's that kind of, he told us that is his experience. And as he was talking, I was asking myself, have I gone through that? Can I actually say, when you do something that is right and other people are not happy, what are they likely to do? And I said, you know what, I agreed with him. And some of you may have seen that there are times as a commission, we do things the unions don't like. The next thing is I find a lot of very nasty comments about me on Twitter, on social media mostly. They might not come to the full media, but people will try and discredit you one way or the other. But you know, it is not likely to become something that physically anyone would harm you or anything, but it is likely to test your ability to ignore the negative vibes. You must be ready for people to say very, very, very many things about you. They try to discourage you and there. So just be ready. Don't expect that if I stand firm, everyone will be happy with me. They will not. But be ready for some of the negative things that you may hear, some vibes, but that's all it can do to you, but you must be ready for it. Then the second one was about most board members tend to be successful entrepreneurs. Is that a trend or not? I think my own experience is not necessarily, because I have been in boards with a mix of both the entrepreneurs and actually those who have been public servants all their lives, right? And yeah, actually I've been in quite a number of boards where, you know, there are people who have been public service all their lives and their experience is valued because then they bring in the public service experience to different boards. So you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be in a board. And remember what I said earlier, that when boards are recruiting, and I've been I've chaired committees that recruit boards in different organizations, the mix you're looking for is more around the typical skills. You need someone with maybe an audit skill, you need a finance skill, you need a HR skill. Nobody will say, I need an entrepreneur. Probably you could say maybe the entrepreneurs are able to demonstrate certain leadership qualities that you know, so certain boards may appreciate. But quite honestly, no, the mix has to be a mix. And it's a requirement in a number of organizations that the boards must have a skill mix. And therefore, it's not about being an entrepreneur. The third one about value and culture, where an organization will have values, but they don't live by it. And I must agree with you that there are many, many organizations, and I have even come across some of them where the values are written, they are very good values, but do people live those values? In many cases, you might find in private sector, they tend to, by the way, quite a number, but not all of them. There are also quite a number who just write values, they don't. And your question was, when they are different on the ground, what do you do? And it really depends on where you sit in the organization. If you are in leadership, it is then one of your responsibilities to help that organization to embed the values. If you are in a leadership position and you're able to influence. And for example, if you were appointed to a board and you realize that there are values, but nobody's living those values, that would be one of the things you can actually champion in that organization, to champion them to embed the values. But at individual level, you will have to decide, do I want to stay here, even when I can see the values, they're not living the values they talk about. That to me becomes a personal decision that you have to decide. But if it comes to an organization that then you are compromising your own values, you're better off moving elsewhere. One of the things personally, and you'll see that I changed my careers many times. I've worked for about 6 organizations. And in each one of them, it is a question of you deciding, what do you want for yourself? Sometimes we tend to look at the organization and forget about your own interest. So think about your own interest. Remember that your career doesn't end with one organization. If your value system cannot stand what you see around, by all means, there are many other employers. But I agree with you that there is always just disconnect in a number of organizations. But if you're in leadership, please champion to see, to influence the change. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, ladies, for those questions. I'm sure we'll have a lot more time to interact with Lynn, both in our virtual sessions, but also when we come back to plenary. So at this juncture, allow me to introduce our co-facilitators who will be chairing the various virtual groups. And this is how it's going to work. So we'll divide ourselves into 4 virtual groups, and Kantai will help us set those up. You will be assigned to a group, and that group will be chaired by one of the ladies who I'm going to introduce very shortly. And Lynn will be our ambassador for today, and she'll move from one group to another so that then you have a bit more discussion around her journey and perhaps share experiences as well. So our co-facilitators this evening, I will start off with Naomi Wanjirun Jerry. She's an astute and inclusive and highly influential professional for international development organizations and academia. She has worked with Kenya Airways, United Nations Mission in Somalia, and Central African Republic. She's also lectured at Kenyatta University and is currently working with African Development Bank in Ivory Coast as a senior budget officer. She is a contributor to the Sunday Nation Pullout on climate action. She has served on several boards, including the International Community School of Abidjan and Impact Direct Foundation, an NGO based in Netherlands. She graduated with a master's degree from the University of Cambridge in the UK and Kenyatta University, and holds a first-class honors in mathematics from JKU Art. So very interesting profile there. Our second co-facilitator is Evelyn Nyawera. She's a hospitality training consultant and head of compliance and hospitality customer service at TSG Group in Kenya. She has 29 years of experience in the hospitality industry, both in Kenya and in the UK. She's a member of Women on Boards Network, Kenya chapter, a board member of Olympia Wafula Foundation in the UK, and a member of Public Relations Society of Kenya. So karibu sana, Evelyn, and we're looking forward to sharing your experience. Our last co-facilitator is Diana Sawe Tanui. She's a professional with expertise in legal, governance, and alternative dispute resolution. She is the Corporation Secretary and Director Legal Services at IRA with 16 years experience in the legal practice. She's currently the chairperson of the Institute of Certified Secretaries and serves as a director in the board of CASNEB and has previously served as a council member of the Council for Legal Education. So welcome, ladies. We'll now request Kantai to break us up into our rooms. Each room will take about 15 minutes. Before then, we can move Lynn from one room to another. So Kantai, over to you.